I gave up a scholarship and went to work. And so that sort of diminished my capacity to be more engaged in all these different campus activism and activities. But that work was at McDonald's. And so the worst 6 months of my life was that first job. I've been a vegetarian / pescatarian ever since then. And I have not yet eaten at a McDonald's since 1984. Y'all want to ask me later about why and what I know? I will be happy to tell you. But what was interesting is in that moment of actually quitting right before I got fired for taking the freshly made disposable food and giving it to homeless people, I found an ad in the paper for the Feminist Women's Health Center opening for a job. And back then, the way the jobs worked is you showed up, you volunteered and trained for 6 weeks, and if you still thought you wanted to work there, then you got the job. And what was interesting was trying to look for that next niche place, because the anti-apartheid stuff was coming to a close by my senior year. The Board of Trustees finally divested. The president resigned in the same press conference. So my entree was working at Feminist. Now, the moment of joining the movement, though, wasn't working at Feminist. That was sort of the pathway that gave me the undergirding. The moment was between my first and second year at Spelman College, when I was touring another prospective family across the campus and saw all these amazing black women that I had been studying at a black women's college that had no women's studies program. So folks like June Jordan and Alice Walker and all of Sweet Honey in the Rock and Angela Davis and all these amazing women, because they were there for what Marlene described yesterday as the first ever National Conference on Black Women's Health. That was my moment. I became a member then, I've been a member ever since, and that was the driver to everything else that I've done ever since.
So the theme definitely is that it is all about the personal life experience that has led you to entering the movement. Can you tell us some important moments, some contributions that you feel you have made to the movement, just things that stand out for you personally, things that you're proud of?
You want to start this way again?
Well, we just go the other way.
So, in terms of contributions, is that what we're proud of?
Yeah.
I'm trying to follow my questioning and my iPad shut down. So I think there are two things just in terms of what I hope that we've left. One is, I think I'm really, really proud of the fact that I was intentional about creating safe space, what I learned based on the self-help movement of the National Black Women's Health Project, and that was the visceral, emotional, mental, spiritual components of self-help, and then the self-help components in the physical and understanding the body and the realm of physical feminism in addition to the politicization of feminism. And so creating safe space for HIV positive women to heal and to lead. I think that that's a really important thing that I've been intentional about at Sister Love. And the other part was, through that work, I think is actually cutting the trail from the southern end of this country, cutting the trail to the intersection of HIV and reproductive justice.
Thank you.
Okay. Since Jane was the first project I worked in when I was in my early 20s, it was really the formative event of my life in a lot of ways. I should sort of backtrack a little and say that a lot of us who got involved were already quite left in our politics and had worked on lots of other issues and came out of those issues. But Jane really taught me about, in a very visceral way, taught me to understand the dynamics of power and to see those dynamics at play everywhere, in my life, in other people's lives, in what we did in Jane, in fact. The dynamics of power played themselves out, and that can't be denied. So I don't know if that's a contribution, to the movement, but I think that that way of looking at the world and understanding issues, very disparate issues, is really important so that you don't wind up in little boxes that are separate from each other, and this is the way I look at this issue, and this is the way I look at this other issue as different. That the way that power politics plays out in the world, it plays out in the world, and it plays out in our own lives as well. So I guess my other contribution, I'm just stumbling on that word, is writing the book, The Story of Jane, which I hope was a contribution and continues to be a contribution to all of our evolving politics and consciousness and understanding what really we can do in the world. My choices have been to work in small ways. I saw the world change in Jane because I saw individual women's lives change. The women that I counseled in my home, the women whose hands I held during their abortions, I saw their view of themselves and of the world around them evolve through that experience, which was mind-blowing, I mean, when you think about it. And so and though I didn't consciously say to myself, oh, I always want to work in those individual kinds of ways, when I look back at my life, that is indeed what I've done. So I've worked on projects where I've got like really direct relationship with individual women, watching them grow and evolve, and supporting that in any way that I can.
Story of James.
So my contribution, and I do agree, the stumbling over that is like, well, contribution. But my work to keep...
How about your gift?
My gift, I like that. So my gift really has been that I have continued to press and move forward legal and safe abortion in rural communities in California, really against almost at times insurmountable odds. So, you know, you don't think about it at the time you're doing it because, you know, you're coming in to, you know, a type of maybe work. You're coming into, I came in because it was where supportive women were that were doing really the right thing, which was making women's lives important and respecting women and really carving a path for my own development as a woman. So I landed at the Feminist Women's Health Center and standing on the shoulders of many women before me, because I came in the early 80s, and I had earlier been doing land occupation with the Native American groups, which was also a big formation into the women's movement, because it was confusing for me. Because here was this women's movement that was really going. I have two older sisters, and they were smack dab in the women's movement, but we always felt a little bit outside of it because you know, we were doing a lot of land occupation, a lot of Native American resistance, and I remember we were doing this resistance on this one in this one territory, and it was in eastern Shasta County, and it was the Pitt River Nation had decided to take on the big corporation Pacific Gas and Electric. So we were, you know, aligning ourselves with this movement. And I remember there was busloads of students from Berkeley coming up and, you know, really giving us support and being allied. And I remember I was in the kitchen and I was really cooking, and, you know, the police were coming, and, you know, but we just kept cooking, and the guys were all around. We had this makeshift camp. And I remember then having a circle in the evening. So the women were really critical that we were in the kitchen. And that was kind of one of my first times of seeing that, well, culturally I had no problem. I loved feeding my family. It was a very affirmative, I never looked at it as oppression. And so I was being met with these women that were saying, you are being oppressed, you know, you're not part of the organizing, you're not part of the leadership. And I remember feeling really confused, thinking, I don't know where this is coming from, because I really dig that you're up here and you're aligning yourself with us, and it felt very powerful and good. But I really saw that there was like this difference. So moving forward, I start working with women that I have to learn that there are differences, but there are great commonalities. So the great commonalities have kind of propelled me and kept me moving forward. And with women that I may not have felt completely kismet with, I was able to build a really deep relationship that we're continuing to provide abortion services. We've done great things. I've, you know, myself, a gift, you know, I learned menstrual extraction, and I learned it as, you know, I was seizing the technology that no matter what, I could teach myself to do menstrual extraction in groups of women. We would never, I mean, talk about a resistor. I mean, maybe that should be mine, instead of activist, a resistor. But it was like, I'm gonna have this technology. Nobody will ever take it from us. And we will always be able to determine our greatest potential for ourselves. So, anyway, I just got.
I love you. Well, since I've been in this movement 40 years, you tend to accumulate a lot that you think of as your gifts or your contributions. I mean, in the early 70s, we were racializing the analysis of violence against women because we were experiencing violence as, you know, racial violence as well as what's now called interpersonal violence and state violence. And even at the DC Rape Crisis Center, we had to fight to do anti-apartheid work because so many people thought that we were just distracting ourselves from the real work of fighting violence against women or doing anti-gentrification work in Washington, D.C. because Capitol Hill or Adams Morgan hadn't yet gentrified. We were trying to save our homes and stuff. So that was some of the early stuff that I really see insight as part of that legacy of continuing to work on multiple violences against ourselves, our communities. And we never lost the connection between interpersonal violence and community violence. You know, because it's hard to feel personally safe in a community that's not safe. Then another job I had me working to fight the white supremacist movement. And so I had a chance to do a research project that showed the connection between white supremacist violence and anti-abortion violence, because there was a time when we saw those movements as separate, as if, you know, people who were doing peaceful prayers that had nothing to do with people who were burning crosses. And it turns out that they were a very porous, crossed over movement. And a year later, Dr. Gunn got killed. The first murder happened. And we were seeing the anti-abortion movement taking on the white supremacist violent tactics. And so that was important. Then in the 1990s, I began looking at the human rights framework and started the National Center for Human Rights Education. That I think we succeeded, Dazon. Dazon used to work with me in that, because now human rights is on the lips of many, many activists in the United States, where it was not there at all before we, you know, did that massive human rights education project that passed out, you know, over 250,000 copies of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and stuff like that. So I like to think I played a small role in helping that. And then in 1994, I was with a group of black women, 12 black women, who created the reproductive justice analysis. And so, you know, people asked her, you know, are you worried about your legacy? I said, oh, hell no. I'm worried about how I'm gonna get some of this Obamacare, but I ain't worried about my legacy.